Hello everyone and welcome to Until the End of Time. My name is Werner. Thank you for joining me. We're doing another preview video because FFG just keeps giving out preview cards. That's awesome. So these previews are courtesy of Mythos Busters. They previewed these last night on their Twitch channel. The replay is up on YouTube. If you want to watch, links are in the description below. We've got two new cards for the Jacqueline Fine Investigator starter deck. So let's delve right in. Some of you might remember this old core set card, Arcane Studies. It is a 2-cost asset with a willpower and intellect icon. It's a talent. And you can spend a fast action to spend one resource, you get +1 willpower for the skill test. Fast action, spend a resource, you get +1 intellect for the skill test. Now, back in the core set days, this was how we boosted skill values, and back then, Mystics didn't even have spells to investigate with, so this was kind of important. But along the way, this card has gotten less and less important, though sometimes we still use it, especially in, surprisingly, Jenny, who likes having ways to boost her willpower and intellect with the lots of money she makes. If you own the Return to the Night of Zealot box, you might also know Arcane Studies level 2, which is the same card, except it costs 0 resources and has an extra willpower and intellect icon. Same text, but are you ready? Because now we will be revealing, except if you've already seen it, because Mythos Busters pre-showed it first, Arcane Studies level 4. Similarly, 2-cost asset, 4 XP, 2 willpower, 2 intellect icons, talent. Uses 2 resources. Replenish these resources at the start of each round. Fast action, spend 1 resource from your resource pool or from Arcane Studies. You get +1 willpower or +1 intellect for this skill test. So essentially, that bottom ability is exactly the same as the previous ones, it's just not split into 2 different abilities now. Except for the part where you get 2 resources to use this every single round. Now, start of the round is actually really nice timing for that refresh, because it means that if you use this in Mythos phase, you're not waiting, or you're not using the, say it restarted at the refresh at the start of your turn, then if you spent your resource during your turn, you wouldn't have them during the Mythos phase. But now you know if you get a willpower treachery in Mythos phase you want to beat, you can use these, you just won't have them for your turn. Okay, so how good is this? Because it's 4 XP, which is a lot. That is hard to answer, because as it sits, Mystics usually rely primarily on their willpower, their intellect is not that important, and they use cards like Holy Rosary to boost their willpower, or they just have spells which boost willpower. So they prefer a more static approach, and then spending 4 XP for this card gets kind of tricky. Now, it being locked at 4 XP also means there's not going to be any off-class investigators that are using this. So that puts us in kind of a tricky position. Now, that doesn't mean it's immediately useless, that would be a shame. And I also don't think that's necessarily true, because there are some investigators that maybe like it. For example, both Marie and Luke have fairly high intellect, and in the case of Luke at least, he has access to seeker cards. Marie can take a couple of seeker cards. So there are at least a few mystics who maybe like to use their intellect for investigating. If you do that, you can keep your spell slots for evading, for fighting, maybe for something like sealing an autofill token, because there's a card that takes up the arcane slot that seals the autofill token, right? The fact that this is slotless and allows you to boost your intellect, basically how much money you have, is kind of useful, right? This is, at its worst, it's going to be a +2 willpower, +2 intellect to 1 test every single round. That's like definitely not bad. The problem is it's going to compete with kind of established combo in the Mystic faction, right? Like have all your willpower boosting cards, have your spells, and just play that way. So at the moment, I don't really see this immediately, breaking the meta wide open. I don't think it's a card that immediately changes the way how we see Mystics, but I do think it's a nice add. I also think it's a very interesting card from a potential cycle ID, because it might also mean that we're getting the same card, but for all the other classes. So physical trading for Guardian, hyper awareness for Seeker, Hard Knocks for Rogue, and Dig Deep for Survivor. And if we are getting those, then that would potentially mean that we are getting some that we would like. Because, for example, Hard Knocks in Rogue boosts agility and combat. If we get a version like this for rogues, that could mean that we have a reliable way for rogues to boost their combat, which is pretty nice because that's something that someone like Schizo Tool would really like, right? Some reliable way without having to waste a lot of money to just keep that combat up. And don't forget, you can just spend resources from your resource pool. Like it's tempting to just use the resources this gives you every round and never use your own money, but that's probably not the best use. Best use is probably to use those resources from the talent itself as often as possible to keep the, it's free money. But if you just need to pass a test, you just pump your money in there, right? So I like this design. I really like this design. I think the Mystic one is kind of, by the nature of how Mystics work, kind of the worst. But I do think it's a really cool design, and I'm really now hoping we're getting one of these for every faction, because that would be awesome. However, that's not the end of the video, because there's a second preview card. Prescient. I believe that's how you pronounce that. It's a skill, it's level 0 skill in Mystic. It is a single willpower icon, and it is practiced and augury traded. And it reads, max 1 committed per skill test. After you commit Prescient to a skill test, name even, odd, or symbol. After this test ends, if a chaos token of the name type was revealed during this test, you may return a spell card from your discard pile to your hand. Wow, this card is so good. So, how this works is, first of all, you don't need to pass the test. You just need to get the token that you named to be revealed. So it can be either an even token, an odd token, or a symbol token. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe Bless and Curse tokens from the Intimate Conspiracy are considered to be symbol tokens. So if you are running those, then that just makes it even better. Most Chaos bags have about a 33% split of each of those, right? You start with roughly 5 or 6 even tokens, 5 or 6 odd tokens, 5 or 6 symbol tokens. But, make sure you check your bag to know what's correct. And in general, I don't think you're playing this card for the 33% odd. I think you're playing this with, 100% odds. When you Premonition, which is a card I personally think should probably go in basically every Mystic deck that has the space for it, you just know what token's going to be revealed. You just name that token, whatever that is, and you just get a spell card back. If you are a little bit more of the gambly sort, cards like Olive McBride can just let you reveal more tokens. Of course, Jacqueline Fine, the Mystic in which this card is being released, also has an ability that lets you reveal more tokens. And that way, hopefully you can find whatever token you were looking for. Similarly, Grotesque Statue from the core set lets you reveal more tokens. Dark Prophecy is especially interesting, which is a card from Forgotten Age. It lets you reveal 5 tokens, but you have to pick a symbol. In this case, that's fine. Just name symbol, say this, throw it in there, get your card back. And finally, let's not forget about Scrying Mirror, another card that's been previewed for Jacqueline's deck, that also lets you reveal the Chaos tokens before actually committing cards. Now, how good is getting a spell back? I basically just compare it to Resourceful, which is a Survivor card that I personally think is one of the best Survivor cards in the game, because it's most other Survivor cards in the game. So Resourceful lets you get a Survivor card from your discard pile back to your hand if you pass the committed test. For Mystics, it's not quite the same, because there are a bunch of Mystic cards that aren't spells. I mean, all the cards that I just named that let you reveal more tokens aren't, so, you'll have some in your deck. But a large part of them will be, and more importantly, the most important cards will be spells. Think about, your Shrivelings and your Rite of Seekings, right? Your spell assets that let you do the basic actions of the game with willpower instead of their normal stats. Or maybe you want to use spell events, cards like Ethereal Form that let you evade and then just become ethereal. Or Spectral Razor that deal lots of damage. Like, this card is insanely good. Read the signs, just find multiple clues and ignore any bad effects. And let's not forget about protective stuff, like Deny Existence is a spell, Word of Protection is a spell. So there are a lot of good targets for this card, and the nice thing about Recursion is that this is essentially whatever of these kinds of effects that you need the most right now. In a way, it's a lot like search effects. Recursion in card games in general is a lot like search effects, right? You grab your discard pile and you go looking through it and go, okay, what do I need right now? And Prescient in that way is a very cheap, very effective way of doing that. Now, you can't just run this in every Mystic deck, because you need to have ways of either revealing multiple tokens or making sure that you have some way of knowing what token you're going to get before committing this to the test, because I don't think you should be playing this with just the normal odds. You're going to lose a lot, and this for just a willpower icon isn't worth it. But fortunately, Mystics have a lot of good cards that allow them to do this. Dark Prophecy, for example, it's also an ignore card, so it just slides into Diana, and in general you will find that you'll have space for a couple of these cards in most decks, and they just make their game a little easier. Add in Prescient as well, just makes your game even more smoothly. Yeah, so it is a recursion card in a faction that is very limited on recursion, and that has a lot of good spell cards that can recur. It is worth pointing out, it's not just recurring Mystic spell cards. So if you use this in an off-class card, you can off-class Investigator, you could potentially get other stuff back. Especially thinking in Sefina, you might be running the Suggestion spell, which is an evasion rogue card, and in any Survivor, you could be running Alter Fate, which is a spell. So keep those in mind for potential off-classes. It's a little bit trickier there because Mystics are the one most likely running this in skill tests, or running a willpower only skill test, because that's one of the big things that Resourceful has over this. Resourceful has 3 different skill icons. This only has a will icon. It's not bad, definitely not saying that makes it worse because Mystics are taking lots of will tests, but keep that in mind. So these are the 2 new cards from the Investigator starter decks that were previewed yesterday. Thank you to FFG, thank you to Mythos Busters for previewing these. We have level 4 Arcane Studies and Prescient as our 2 new cards. Very exciting. Thank you for watching, and I'll be seeing you until the end of time.